He reminds him of the guys, close-set, slow, and never rattled, who were playmakers on the team. When Stavros, taking thought, moves around the obstacle of momentary indecision toward their booth, it is Harry who says, "Join us," though Janice, face downcast, has already slid over. Charlie says to Janice, "The whole caboodle, beautiful." She says, "These two are being horrible." Rabbit says, "We can't read the menu." Nelson says, "Charlie, what's calamaria? I want some." "No, you don't. It's little, like, octopuses cooked in their own ink." "Ick," Nelson says. "Nelson," Janice says sharply. Rabbit says, "Sit yourself down, Charlie." "I don't want to butt in. It'd be a favor, hell." "Dad's being grumpy," Nelson confides. Janice impatiently pats the place beside her. Charlie sits down and asks her, "What does the kid like?" "Hamburgers," Janice moans theatrically. She's become an actress suddenly, every gesture and intonation charged to carry across an implied distance. Charlie's squarish, intent head is bowed above the menu. "Let's get him some keftedes, okay, Nelson? Meatballs. Not with tomatoey goo on them. No goo, just the meat. A little mint. Mint's what's in Lifesavers, okay?" "Okay. You'll love 'em." But Rabbit feels the boy has been sold a slushy car, and he feels with Stavros's broad shoulders next to Janice's, and the man's hands each sporting a chunky gold ring, that the table has taken a turn down a road Rabbit didn't choose. He and Nelson are in the back seat. Janice says to Stavros, "Charlie, why don't you order for all of us? We don't know what we're doing." Rabbit says, "I know what I'm doing. I'll order for myself. I want the—" he picks something off the menu at random. "The paidakia." "Paidakia," Stavros says. "I don't think so. It's marinated lamb. You need to order it the day before for at least 6. Nelson says, "Dad, the movie starts in 40 minutes. Janice explains, "We're trying to get to see this silly space movie." Stavros nods as if he knows. There is a funny echo Rabbit's ears pick up. Things said between Janice and Stavros sound dead, duplicated. Of course they work together all day. Stavros tells them it's lousy. "Why is it lousy?" Nelson asks anxiously. There is a look his face gets, bloating his lips and slightly sucking his eyes back into their sockets, that hasn't changed since his infancy, when his bottle would go dry. Stavros relents. "Nellie, for you it'll be great. It's all toys. For me it just wasn't sexy. I guess I don't find technology that sexy." "Does everything have to be sexy?" Janice asks. "It doesn't have to be. It tends to be," Stavros tells her. This book is continued on cassette number 2, side 1. "Does everything have to be sexy?" Janice asks. "It doesn't have to be. It tends to be," Stavros tells her. To Rabbit he says, "Have some souvlakia. You'll love it. And it's quick." And in an admirable, potent little gesture, he moves his hand, palm outward, as if his fingers had been snapped, without lifting his elbow from the table, and the motherly woman comes running to them. "Yazoo, kalispera," she answers. While Stavros orders in Greek, Harry studies Janice, her peculiar glow. Time has been gentle to her, as if it felt sorry for her. The something pinched and mean about her mouth that she had even in her teens has been relaxed by the appearance of other small wrinkles in her face, and her hair, whose sparseness once annoyed him, as another emblem of his poverty, she now brings down over her ears from a central parting in 2 smooth wings. She wears no lipstick, and in certain lights her face owns a gypsy severity and the dignity present in newspaper photographs of female guerrilla fighters. The gypsy look she got from her mother, the dignity from the 60s, which freed her from the need to look fluffy. Plain is beautiful enough, and now she is all circles in happiness, squirming on her round bottom and dancing her hands through arcs of exaggeration, quick white in the candlelight. She tells Stavros, "If you hadn't shown up, we would have starved." "No," he says, a reassuring, factual man. "They would have taken care of you. These are nice people." "These two," she says, "are so American they're helpless." "Yeah," Stavros says to Rabbit. "I see the decal you put on your old Falcon." "I told Charlie," Janice tells Rabbit. "I certainly didn't put it there." "What's wrong with it?" he asks them both. "It's our flag, isn't it?" It's somebody's flag, Stavros says, not liking this trend, and softly bouncing his fingertips together under his sheltered bad eyes. But not yours, huh? Harry gets fanatical about this, Janice warns. I don't get fanatical. I just get a little sad about people who come over here to make a fat buck. I was born here, Stavros quickly says. So was my father. And then knock the fucking flag, Rabbit continues, like it's some piece of toilet paper. A flag is a flag. It's just a piece of cloth. It's more than just a piece of cloth to me. What is it to you? It's the mighty Mississippi. It's people not finishing my sentences all the time. Just half the time. That's better than all the time like they have in China. Look, the Mississippi is very broad. The Rocky Mountains really swing. I just can't get too turned on about cops bopping hippies on the head and the Pentagon playing cowboys and Indians all over the globe. That's what your little sticker means to me. It means screw the blacks and send the CIA into Greece. If we don't send somebody in, the other side sure as hell will. The Greeks can't seem to manage the show by themselves. Harry, don't make yourself ridiculous. They invented civilization, Janice says. To Stavros, she says, see how little and tight his mouth gets when he thinks about politics? I don't think about politics, Rabbit says. That's one of my goddamn precious American rights, not to think about politics. I just don't see why we're supposed to walk down the street with our hands tied behind our back and let ourselves be blackjacked by every thug who says he has a revolution going. And it really burns me up to listen to hot-shot crap car salesmen dripping with Vitalis sitting on their plumped-up asses bitching about a country that's been stuffing goodies into their mouth ever since they were born. Charlie makes to rise. I better go. This is getting too rich. Don't go, Janice begs. He doesn't know what he's saying. He's sick on the subject. Yeah, don't go, Charlie. Stick around and humor the madman. Charlie lowers himself again and states in measured fashion, I want to follow your reasoning. Tell me about the goodies we've been stuffing into Vietnam. Christ, exactly. We'd turn it into another Japan if they'd let us. That's all we want to do, make a happy, rich country full of highways and gas stations. Poor old LBJ, Jesus, with tears in his eyes on television. You must have heard him. He just about offered to make North Vietnam the 51st fucking state of the goddamn Union if they'd just stop throwing bombs. We're begging them to rig some elections, any elections, and they'd rather throw bombs. What more can we do? We're trying to give ourselves away. That's all our foreign policy is trying to give ourselves away to make little yellow people happy. And guys like you sit around in restaurants moaning, Jesus, we're rotten. I thought it was us and not them throwing the bombs. We've stopped. We stopped like all you liberals were marching for, and what did it get us? He leans forward to pronounce the answer clearly. Not shit! The whispering couple across the room look over in surprise. The family 2 booths away have hushed their noise to listen. Nelson is desperately blushing, his eyes sunk hot and sad in his sockets. Not shit, Harry repeats more softly. He leans over the tablecloth beside the trembling daisies. Now I suppose you're going to say napalm, that frigging magic word. They've been burying village chiefs alive and tossing mortars into hospitals for 20 years, and because of napalm, they're candidates for the Albert F. Schweitzer Peace Prize. S.H. it. He has gotten loud again. It makes him rigid. The thoughts of the treachery and ingratitude befouling the flag, befouling him. Harry, you'll get us kicked out, Janice says. But he notices she is still happy, all in circles, a cookie in the oven. I'm beginning to dig him, Stavros tells her. If I get your meaning, he says to Rabbit, we're the big mama trying to make this unruly kid take some medicine that'll be good for him. That's right, you got it. We are. And most of them want to take the medicine. They're dying for it. And a few madmen in black pajamas would rather bury him alive. What's your theory? That we're in it for the rice? The Uncle Ben theory? Rabbit laughs and adds, bad old Uncle Ben. No, Stavros says, squaring his hands on the checked tablecloth and staring level-browed at the base of Harry's throat, gingerly with him, Harry notices. Why? My theory is it's a mistaken power play. It isn't that we want the rice. We don't want them to have it. Or the magnesium, or the coastline. We've been playing chess with the Russians so long we didn't know we were off the board. White faces don't work in yellow countries anymore. Kennedy's advisors, who thought they could run the world from the dean's office, pushed the button and nothing happened. Then Oswald voted Johnson in, who was such a bonehead he thought all it took was a bigger thumb on the button. So the machine overheated. You got inflation and a falling market at one end, and college riots at the other, and in the middle, 40,000 sons of American mothers killed by shit-smeared bamboo. People don't like having Sonny killed in the jungle anymore. Maybe they never liked it, but they used to think it was necessary. And isn't it? Stavros blinks. I see. You say war has to be. Yeah, and better there than here. Better little wars than big ones. Stavros says, his hands on edge, ready to chop. But you like it. His hands chop. Burning up gook babies is right where you're at, friend. The friend is weak. Rabbit asks him, how did you do your army bit? Stavros shrugs, squares his shoulders. I was 4F, tricky ticker. I hear you sat out the Korean thing in Texas. I went where they told me. I'd still go where they told me. Bully for you. You're what made America great, a real gunslinger. He's silent majority, Janice says, but he keeps making noise, looking at Stavros hopefully for a return on her quip. God, she is dumb, even if her ass has shaped up in middle age. He's a normal product, Stavros says. He's a typical, good-hearted, imperialist racist. Rabbit knows, from the careful, level way this is pronounced, with that little tuck of a sold-car smile, that he is being flirted with, asked, his dim feeling is, for an alliance. But Rabbit is locked into his intuition that to describe any of America's actions as a power play is to miss the point. America is beyond power. It acts as in a dream, as a face of God. Wherever America is, there is freedom, and wherever America is not, madness rules with chains, darkness strangles millions. Beneath her patient bombers, paradise is possible. He fights back. I don't follow this racist rap. You can't turn on television now without some black face spitting at you. Everybody from Nixon down is sitting up nights trying to figure out how to make 'em all rich without putting 'em to the trouble of doing any work. His tongue is reckless, but he is defending something infinitely tender, the star lit with his birth. They talk about genocide when they're the ones planning it. They're the ones, the Negroes, plus the rich kids who want to pull it all down. Not that they can't run squealing for a lawyer whenever some poor cop squints funny at 'em. The Vietnam War, in my opinion... Anybody want my opinion? Harry, Janice says, you're making Nelson miserable. My opinion is, you have to fight a war now and then to show you're willing, and it doesn't much matter where it is. The trouble isn't this war, it's this country. We wouldn't fight in Korea now. Christ, we wouldn't fight Hitler now. This country is so zonked out on its own acid, sunk so deep in its own fat and babble and filth it would take H-bombs on every city from Detroit to Atlanta to wake us up. And even then, we'd probably think we'd just been kissed. Harry, Janice asks, do you want Nelson to die in Vietnam? Go ahead, tell him you do. Harry turns to their child and says, Kid, I don't want you to die any place. Your mother's the girl that's good at death. Even he knows how cruel this is. He is grateful to her for not collapsing, for blazing up instead. Oh, she says. Oh, tell him why he has no brothers or sisters, Harry. Tell him who refused to have another child. This is getting too rich, Stavros says. I'm glad you're seeing it, Janice tells him, her eyes sunk deep. Nelson gets that from her. Mercifully, the food arrives. Nelson balks, discovering the meatballs drenched in gravy. He looks at Rabbit's tidily skewered lamb and says, That's what I wanted. Let's swap then. Shut up and eat, Rabbit says. He looks across to see that Janice and Stavros are having the same thing, a kind of white pie. They are sitting, to his printer's sense, too close, leaving awkward space on either side. To poke them into adjustment, he says, I think it's a swell country. Janice takes it up, Stavros chewing in silence. Harry, you've never been to any other country. He addresses himself to Stavros. Never had the desire to. I see these other countries on TV. They're all running like hell to be like us and burning our embassies because they can't make it fast enough. What other countries do you get to? Stavros interrupts his eating grudgingly to utter, Jamaica. Wow, Rabbit says, a real explorer. 3 hours by jet to the lobby of some Hilton. They hate us down there. You mean they hate you? They never see me. I never go. Why do they hate us? Same reason as everywhere. Exploitation. We steal their bauxite. Let 'em trade it to the Ruskies for potatoes then. Potatoes and missile sites. We have missile sites in Turkey, Stavros says, his heart no longer in this. Janice tries to help. We've dropped 2 atom bombs. The Russians haven't dropped any. They didn't have any then, or they would have. Here the Japanese were all set to commit hara-kiri, and we saved them from it. Now look at 'em, happy as clams and twice as sassy, screwing us right and left. We fight their wars for them, while you peaceniks sell their tinny cars." Stavros pats his mouth with a napkin folded squarely and regains his appetite for discussion. "Her point is, we wouldn't be in this Vietnam mess if it was a white country. We wouldn't have gone in. We thought we just had to shout boo and flash a few jazzy anti-personnel weapons. We thought it was one more Cherokee uprising. The trouble is the Cherokees outnumber us now." "Oh, those fucking poor Indians," Harry says. "What were we supposed to do, let 'em have the whole continent for a campfire site?" "Sorry, Tonto. If we had, it'd be in better shape than it is now, and we'd be nowhere. They were in the way." "Fair enough," Stavros says. "Now you're in their way," he adds. "Paleface." "Let 'em come," Rabbit says, and really is at this moment a defiant bastion. The tender blue flame has become cold fire in his eyes. He stares them down. He stares at Janice, and she is dark and tense, an Indian. Massacre this squaw. Then his son says, his voice strained upward through choked-down tears, "Dad, we're going to be late for the movie." Rabbit looks at his watch and sees they have 4 minutes to get there. The kid is right. Stavros tries to help, fatherly like men who aren't fathers, who think kids can be fooled about essentials. "The opening part's the dullest, Nellie. You won't miss any of the space parts. You got to try some baklava for dessert." "I'll miss the cavemen," Nelson says, the choking almost complete, the tears almost risen. "I guess we should go," Rabbit tells the 2 other adults. "That's rude to Charlie," Janice says. "Really rude. Anyway, I won't be able to stay awake during this interminable movie without coffee." To Nelson, "Baklava is really yummy. It's honey and flakes of thin dough, just the kind of dry thing you love. Try to be considerate, Nelson. Your parents so rarely get to eat in a restaurant." Torn, Rabbit suggests, "Or you could try that other stuff you wanted for the main deal, mellow patties or whatever." The tears do come. The kid's tense face breaks. "You promised," he sobs unanswerably, and hides his face against the white bare wall. "Nelson, I am disappointed in you," Janice tells him. Stavros says to Rabbit, tucking that pencil behind his ear again, "If you want to run now, she could get her coffee and I'll drop her off at the movie house in 10 minutes. "That's a possibility," Janice says slowly, her face opening cautiously, a dull flower. Rabbit tells Stavros, "Okay, great, thanks. You're nice to do that. You're nice to put up with us at all. Sorry if I said anything too strong. I just can't stand to hear the U.S. knocked. I'm sure it's psychological. Janice, do you have money? Charlie, you tell her how much we owe." Stavros repeats that masterful small gesture of palm outward. "You owe zilch. On me." There can be no argument. Standing, himself in a hurry to see the cavemen, raw meat, a bone turning into a spaceship, Rabbit experiences among them here in this restaurant where the Penn Park couple are paying their bill as if laying a baby to rest, keen family happiness. It prompts him to say to Janice, to cheer Nelson up further, "Remind me tomorrow to call your father about those baseball tickets." Before Janice can intervene, Stavros says, everybody anxious now to please, "He's in the Poconos." Janice thought when Charlie calls Harry Paleface it's the end, from the way Harry looked over at her, his eyes a frightening blue. And then when Charlie let that slip about Daddy being away, she knew it was. But somehow it isn't. Maybe the movie numbs them. It's so long, and then that psychedelic section, where he's landing on the planet before turning into a little old man in a white wig, makes her head hurt. But she rides home, resolved to have it out, to confess and dare him to make his move back. All he can do is run, which might be a relief. She has a glass of vermouth in the kitchen to ready herself, but upstairs Nelson is shutting the door to his room, and Harry is in the bathroom, and when she comes out of the bathroom with the taste of toothpaste on top of the vermouth, Harry is lying under the covers with just the top of his head showing. Janice gets in beside him and listens. His breathing is a sleeping tide, so she lies there awake like the moon. In their 10, though it became 20 minutes over the coffee together, she had told Charlie she had thought it reckless of him to come to the restaurant when he had known she was bringing them, and he said, in that way he has of going on to his dignity, his lips pushing out as if holding a lozenge and the hunch of his shoulders a bit gangsterish, that he thought that's what she wanted, That's why she told him she was going to talk them into it. At the time, she thought silently, he doesn't understand women in love. Just going to his restaurant, eating food that was him, had been enough an act of love for her. He didn't have to make it dangerous by showing up himself. It even coarsened it. Because once he was physically there, all her caution dissolved. If instead of having coffee with her, he had asked her to go to his apartment with him, she would have done it, and was even mentally running through the story she would have told Harry about suddenly feeling sick. But luckily he didn't ask. He finished the coffee and paid the whole bill and dropped her off under the stumpy marquee, as promised. Men are strict that way, want to keep their promises to each other. Women are beneath it, property. The way, while making love, Charlie sells her herself, murmuring about her parts, giving them the names Harry uses only in anger. She resisted at first, but relaxed, seeing for Charlie they were a language of love, his way of keeping himself up, selling her her own cunt. She doesn't panic, as with Harry, knowing he can't hold it much longer. Charlie holds back forever, a thick, sweet toy she can do anything with, her teddy bear. The fur on the back of his shoulders at first shocked her touch, something freakish, but no, that's the way many men still are, cavemen, cave bears. Janice smiles in the dark. In the dark of the car, driving over the bridge along Weiser, he asked her if Harry guessed anything. She said she thought nothing. Though something had been bugging him the last couple of days, her staying so late supposedly at the office, maybe we should cool it a little. Oh, let him stew. His old line on me used to be, I was useless. At first he was delighted I got a job. Now he thinks I neglect Nelson. I say to him, give the boy a little room. He's 13 and you're leaning on him worse than your own mother. He won't even let him get a mini-bike because it's too dangerous, supposedly. Charlie said, he sure was hostile to me. Not really. He's like that about Vietnam with everybody. It's what he really thinks. How can he think that crap? We, them, America first. It's dead. She tried to imagine how. One of the nice things about having a lover, it makes you think about everything anew. The rest of your life becomes a kind of movie, flat and even rather funny. She answered at last, something is very real to him about it. I don't know what it is. She went on with difficulty, for a blurring, a halting comes over her tongue, her head, whenever she tries to think, and one of the many beautiful things about Charlie Stavros is he lets her tumble it out anyway. He has given her not only her body, but her voice. Maybe he came back to me, to Nelson and me, for the old-fashioned reasons, and wants to live an old-fashioned life. But nobody does that anymore, and he feels it. He put his life into rules he feels melting away now. I mean, I know he thinks he's missing something. He's always reading the paper and watching the news. Charlie laughed. The blue lights of the bridge flickered on the backs of his hands parallel on the steering wheel. I get it. You're his overseas commitment. She laughed, too, but it seemed a little hard of him to say, to make a joke of the marriage that was, after all, a part of her, too. Sometimes Charlie didn't quite listen. Her father was like that. A hurry in their blood, wind in their ears. Getting ahead, you miss what the slow people see. Stavros sensed the little wound and tried to heal it, patting her thigh as they arrived at the movie house. Space Odyssey, he said. My idea of a space odyssey would be to get in the sack with your ass and ball for a week. And right here, with the light beneath the marquee slanting into the car, and the agitated last late shreds of the audience buying their tickets, he ran his paw across her breasts and tucked his thumb into her lap. Heated and ruffled by this touch from him, guilty and late, she rushed into the movie house. Its plum carpeting, its unnatural coldness, its display casket of candies, and found Nelson and Harry down front, where they had had to sit because of her, because she had made them late so she could eat her lover's food. The great exploding screen close above them, their hair on fire, their ears translucent red, the backs of their heads innocently alike, had sprung a rush of love within her, like coming, a push of pity that sent her scrambling across the jagged knees of strangers to the seat her husband and son had saved. A car moves on the curved road outside. Rugs of light are hurled across the ceiling. The refrigerator below speaks to itself, drops its own ice into its own tray. Her body feels tense as a harp. She wants to be touched. She touches herself. Hardly ever did it as a girl. After marrying Harry, it seemed certainly wrong. Marriage should make it never necessary. Just turn to the other person and he would fix it. How sad it was with Harry now. They had become locked rooms to each other. They could hear each other cry, but couldn't get in. Not just the baby, though that was terrible, the most terrible thing ever. But even that had faded, flattened, until it seemed it hadn't been her in that room, but an image of her. And she had not been alone. There had been some man in the room with her. He was with her now. Not Charlie, but containing Charlie. Everything you do is done in front of this man, and how good to have him made flesh. She imagines it in her like something you have swallowed. Only big, big, and slow as sugar melts. Except, now that she'd been with him so many times, she could be quick in coming, sometimes asking him just to pound away and startling herself, coming, herself, her toy. How strange to have to learn to play. They used to tell her, everybody, the gym teacher, the Episcopal minister, Mother even, one awful embarrassing time, not to make your body a plaything when that's just what it was. She wonders if Nelson, his bed springs creaking, his little jigger waiting for its hair, poor child, what would he think? What must he think? Such a lonely life, sitting there alone at the TV when she comes home. His mini bike, she's lost it. Though she flutters it faster, she's lost it. Her heat. How silly it all is. We're born and they try to feed us and change our diapers and love us, and we get breasts and menstruate and go boy crazy, and finally one or two come forward to touch us, and we can't wait to get married and have some babies and then stop having them and go man crazy this time without even knowing it, until you're in too deep, the flesh grows more serious as we age. And then eventually that phase must be over, and we ride around in cars and flowered hats for a while to Tucson, or seeing the leaves turn in New Hampshire, and visit our grandchildren, and then get into bed like poor Mrs. Angstrom. Harry is always after her to visit her, but she doesn't see why she should. She never had a good word to say for her when she was healthy, groping for words while her mouth makes spittle, and her eyes trying to pop from her head, trying to hear herself say something malicious. And then there's the nursing home or the hospital. Poor old souls like when they used to visit her father's older sister. TVs going all up and down the hall, and Christmas decorations dropping needles on the linoleum. And then we die, and it wouldn't have mattered if we hadn't bothered to be born at all. And all the time there are wars and riots and history happening, but it's not as important as the newspapers say, unless you get caught in it. Harry seems right to her about that. Vietnam or Korea or the Philippines, nobody cares about them, yet they must be died for. It just is that way, by boys that haven't shaved yet. The other side has boys Nelson's age. How strange it is of Charlie to care so, to be so angry, as if he's a minority, which of course he is. Her father used to talk of gang fights when he was in school, us against them. Springer an English name. Daddy very proud of that. Then why, she used to ask herself at school, was she so dark, olive skin, never sunburned, hair that always frizzed up and never lay flat in bangs, never knew enough until recently to let it grow long in front and pin it back. His fucking Madonna, Charlie calls her, blasphemous, though there is an icon in his bedroom. Didn't have enough body in school, but she forgives those days now, sees she was being shaped all those years toward Charlie, his cunt. His rich cunt, though they were never rich, just respectable. Daddy gave her a little stock to put away the time Harry was acting so irresponsible. The dividend checks come in, the envelopes with windows. She doesn't like Harry to see them. They make light of his working. Janice wants to weep, thinking of how hard Harry has worked these years. His mother used to say how hard he used to work practicing basketball, dribbling, shooting. Whereas, she said so spitefully, Nelson has no aptitude. This is silly. This thinking is getting nowhere. There is tomorrow to face, must have it out with Harry. Charlie shrugs when she asks what to do. At lunch, if Daddy isn't back from the Poconos, they can go over to Charlie's apartment. The light used to embarrass her, but she likes it best in the day now. You can see everything, men's bottoms so innocent, even the little hole like a purse drawn tight, the hair downy and dark, all the sitting they do. The world isn't natural for them anymore. This is silly. Determined to bring herself off, Janice returns her hand, and opens her eyes to look at Harry sleeping, all huddled into himself. Stupid of him to keep her sex locked up all these years. His fault, all his fault. It was there all along. It was his job to call it out. She does everything for Charlie because he asks her. It feels holy. She doesn't care. You have to live. They put you here, you have to live. You were made for one thing. Women now try to deny it, burning their bras, but you were made for one thing. It feels like a falling away, a deep eye opening, a coming into the deep you. Harry wouldn't know about that. He never did dare dwell on it, racing ahead. He's too fastidious, hates sex, really. She was there all along. There she is. Oh, not quite. She knows he knows. She opens her eyes. She sees him lying on the edge of the bed, the edge of a precipice. They are on it together. They are about to fall off. She closes her eyes. She is about to fall off. There. Oh, oh! The bed complains. Janice sinks back. They say, she read somewhere, some doctors measuring your blood pressure when you do it, things taped to your head. How can anybody concentrate? It's always best when you do it to yourself. Her causing the bed to shudder has stirred Harry half awake. He heavily rolls over and loops his arm around her waist, a pale, tall man going fat. She strokes his wrist with the fingers that did it. His fault. He is a ghost, white, soft. Tried to make a box for her to put her in like they put Rebecca in when the poor little baby died. The way she held it, sopping wet against her chest, already dead, she could feel it, and screamed a great red scream as if to make a hole to let life back in. The movie returns upon her, the great wheel turning against the black velvet in time, with the glorious symphony that did lift her for all her confusion, coming into the theater, floating now like a ballerina among the sparse planets of her life. Daddy, Harry, Nelson, Charlie. She thinks of her coming without him as a betrayal of her lover, and furtively lifts her fingertips, with their nice smell of swamp, to her lips and kisses them, thinking, you. Next day, Friday, the papers and television are full of the colored riots in York. Snipers wounding innocent firemen, simple men on the street. What is the world coming to? The astronauts are nearing the moon's gravitational influence. A quick thunderstorm makes up in the late afternoon over Brewer, pelts shoppers and homebound workmen into the entranceways of shops, soaks Harry's white shirt before he and his father get to huddle in the Phoenix bar. "We missed you last night," Earl Angstrom says. "Pop, I told you we couldn't make it. We took the kid out to eat and then to a movie." "Okay, don't bite my head off. I thought you left it more up in the air than that. But never mind, don't kill a man for trying. I said we might was all." "Did she act disappointed?" "She didn't let on. Your mother's nature isn't to let on. You know that. She knows you have your problems." "What problems?" "How was the movie, Harry?" "The kid liked it. I don't know. It didn't make much sense to me. But then I felt kind of sick on something I ate. I fell dead asleep soon as we got home." "How did Janice like it? Did she seem to have a good time?" "Hell, I don't know. At her age, are you supposed to have a good time?" "I hope the other day I didn't seem to be poking my nose in where it doesn't belong." "Mom still raving about it?" "A little bit." "Now, Mother," I tell her. "Now, Mother, Harry's a big boy. Harry's a responsible citizen." "Yeah," Rabbit admits, "maybe that's my problem," and shivers. With his shirt wet, it is cruelly cold in here. He signals for another daiquiri. The television, sound off, is showing film clips of cops in York stalking the streets in 3s and 4s, then cuts to a patrol in Vietnam, boys smudged with fear and fatigue, and Harry feels badly that he isn't there with them. Then the television moves on to the big publicity-mad Norwegian who gave up trying to cross the Atlantic in a paper boat. Even if the TV sound were turned higher, what he's saying would be drowned by the noise in the bar, the excitement of the thunderstorm, plus its being Friday night. "Think you could make it over this evening?" his father asks. "It doesn't have to be for long, just 15 minutes or so. It would mean the world to her, with Mim as good as dead, hardly ever even writing a postcard." "I'll talk to her about it," Harry says, meaning Janice, though he thinks of Mim whoring around on the West Coast, Mim that he used to take sledding on Jackson Road, snowflakes on her hood. He pictures her at parties, waiting with a face of wax, or lying beside a swimming pool freshly oiled, while under the umbrella beside her some suety gangster with a cigar in the center of his face like a secondary prick pulls it from his mouth and guffaws. "But don't get her hopes up," he adds, meaning his mother. "We're sure to be over Sunday. I got to run." The storm has passed. Sun pours through the torn sky, drying the pavement rapidly. Map-like stains, a pulped Kleenex retains an island of wet around it. Overweight bag-luggers and skinny Negro idlers emerge, smiling from the shelter of a disused shoe store's entrance. The defaced bus stop sign, the wrappers spilled from the Keep Brewer Clean can, with its top like a flying saucer, the dimpled and rutted asphalt, all glory, glistening in the deluge having passed. The scattered handkerchiefs and horsetails of inky storm cloud drift east across the ridge of Mount Judge, and the sky resumes the hazed, engendering blank look of Pennsylvania humidity. And nervousness that seeks to condense into anger regathers in Rabbit. Janice is not home when he arrives, neither is Nelson. Coming up the walk, he sees that, freshened by rain, their lawn looks greasy with crabgrass, spiky with plantain. The kid supposedly gets his $1.50 allowance in part for keeping it mowed, but he hasn't since June. The little power mower that had belonged to the Springers until they got one of those you ride leans in the garage, a can of 3-in-1 beside one wheel. He oils it and sloshes in the gasoline, amber in the can, colorless in the funnel, and starts it up on the fourth pull. Its swath spits gummy hunks of wet grass back and forth across the 2 square patches that form their front lawn. There is a larger lawn behind, where the clothes tree stands, and where Nelson and he sometimes play catch with a softball worn down to its strings. It needs mowing, too, but he wants Janice to find him out front, to give her a little guilty start to get them going. But by the time she comes home, swinging down Vista, spraying untarred grit and tucking the Falcon into the garage in that infuriating way of hers, just not quite far enough to close the door on the bumper, the blades of grass are mixing long shadows with their cut tips, and Rabbit stands by their one tree, the spindly maple tethered to the earth, his palm sore from trimming the length of the walk with the hand clippers. "Harry," she says, "you're outdoors. How funny of you." And it is true. Park Villas, with its vaunted quarter-acre lots and compulsory barbecue chimneys, does not tempt its residents outdoors, even the children in summer. In the snug brick neighborhood of Rabbit's childhood, you were always outdoors, hiding in hollowed-out bushes, scuffling in the gravel alleys, secure in the closeness of windows from at least one of which an adult was always watching. Here there is a prairie sadness, a barren sky raked by slender aerials, a sky poisoned by radio waves, a desolate smell from underground. "Where the hell have you been?" "Work, obviously. Daddy always used to say never to cut grass after rain. It's all lying down." "Work, obviously. What's obvious about it?" "Harry, you're so strange. Daddy came back from the Poconos today and made me stay after 6 with Mildred's mess." "I thought he came back from the Poconos days ago." "You lied. Why?" Janice crosses the cut grass, and they stand together, he and she in the tree, the spindly planted maple that cannot grow, as if bewildered by the wide raw light. The kerosene scent of someone else's Friday evening barbecue drifts to them. Their neighbors in Penn Villas are strangers, transients, accountants, salesmen, supervisors, adjusters, people whose lives to them are passing cars and the shouts of unseen children. Janice's color heightens. Her body takes on a defiant suppleness. "I forget. It was a silly lie. You were just so angry over the phone I had to say something. It seemed the easiest thing to say that Daddy was there. You know how I am. You know how confused I get. How much other lying do you do to me?" "None, that I can remember right now. Maybe little things, how much things cost, the sort of things women lie about. Women like to lie, Harry. It makes things more fun." And flirtatious, unlike her. She flicks her tongue against her upper lip and holds it there, like the spring of a trap. She steps toward the young tree and touches it. He asks her, "Where's Nelson?" "I arranged with Peggy for him to spend the night with Billy." "With those dopes again? They give him ideas. At his age, he's going to have ideas anyway." I half promised Pop we'd go over tonight and visit Mom. I don't see why we should visit her. She's never liked me. She's done nothing but try to poison our marriage. Another question. Yes? Are you fucking Stavros? I thought women only got fucked. Janice turns and choppily runs into the house, up the 3 steps, into the house with apple-green aluminum clapboards. Rabbit puts the mower back in the garage and enters by the side door into the kitchen. She is there, slamming pots around, making their dinner. He asks her, "Shall we go out to eat for a change? I know a nifty little Greek restaurant off Plum Street." That was just coincidence he showed up. I admit it was Charlie who recommended it. Is there anything wrong with that? And you were certainly rude to him. You were incredible. I wasn't rude. We had a political discussion. I like Charlie. He's an okay guy for a left-wing, mealy-mouthed wop. You are really very strange lately, Harry. I think your mother's sickness is getting to you. In the restaurant, you seemed to know your way around the menu. Sure he doesn't take you there for lunch? Or on some of those late work nights? You've been working a lot of nights, and don't seem to get much done. You know nothing about what has to be done. I know your old man and Mildred Croust used to do it themselves without all this overtime. Having the Toyota franchise is a whole new dimension. It's endless bills of lading, import taxes, customs forms. More offending words occur to Janice. It is like when she was little, making snow dams in the gutter. Anyway, Charlie has lots of girls. He can have girls any time. Single girls, younger than me. They all go to bed now without even being asked. Everybody's on the pill. They just assume it. One sentence too many. How do you know? He tells me. So you are chummy. Not very. Just now and then, when he's hung or needing a little mothering or something. Right. Maybe he's scared of these hot young tits. Maybe he likes older women, Mamma Mia and all that. These slick Mediterranean types need a lot of mothering. It's fascinating to her to see him circling in. She fights the rising in her of a wifely wish to collaborate, to help him find the truth that sits so large in her own mind she can hardly choose the words that go around it. Anyway, he goes on, those girls aren't the boss's daughter. Yes, that is what he'd think. It was what she thought those first times, those first pats as she was standing tangled in a net of numbers she didn't understand, those first sandwich lunches they would arrange when Daddy was out on the lot, those first 5 o'clock whiskey sours in the Atlas bar down the street, those first kisses in the car, always a different car, one they had borrowed from the lot, with a smell of new car, like a skin of glaze their touches were burning through. That was what she thought until he convinced her it was her. Funny old clumsy her. Janice Angstrom, née Springer, turned Springer again, in bud. It was her flesh being licked like ice cream, her time being stolen in moments compressed as diamonds, her nerves caught up in a hair-fine watch-spring cycle of pleasure that oscillated between them in tightening swift circles until it seemed a kind of frenzied sleep, a hypnosis so intense that later in her own bed she could not sleep at all, as if she had napped that afternoon. His apartment, they discovered, was only 12 minutes distant, if you drove the back way, by the old farmer's market that was now just a set of empty tin-roofed sheds. What good would my being the boss's daughter do him? It'd make him feel he was climbing. All these Greeks or Polacks or whatever are on the make. I'd never realized, Harry, how full of racial prejudice you are. Yes or no about you and Stavros? No. But lying, she felt, as when a child watching the snow dams melt, that the truth must push through. It was too big, too constant. Though she was terrified and would scream, it was something she must have, her confession like a baby. She felt so proud. You dumb bitch, he says. He hits her not in the face but on the shoulder, like a man trying to knock open a stuck door. She hits him back, clumsily, on the side of the neck, as high as she can reach. Harry feels a flash of pleasure, sunlight in a tunnel. He hits her 3, 4, 5 times, unable to stop, boring his way to that sunlight, not as hard as he can hit, but hard enough for her to whimper. She doubles over so that his last punches are thrown hammer-wise down into her neck and back, an angle he doesn't see her from that much, the chalk-white parting, the candle-white nape, the bra strap showing through the fabric of the back of the blouse. Her sobbing arises muffled and astonished by a beauty expressed by her abasement, by a face that shines through her reduction to this craven, faceless posture, He pauses. Janice senses that he will not hit her any more. Janice senses that he will not hit her any more. She abandons her huddle, flops over to her side, and lets herself cry out loud, high-pitched, a startled noise pinched between sieges of windy gasping. Her face is red, wrinkled, newborn. In curiosity, he drops to his knees to examine her. Her black eyes flash at this, and she spits up at his face, but misjudges. The saliva falls back into her own face. For him, there is only the faintest kiss of spray. Flecked with her own spit, Janice cries, I do sleep with Charlie. Ah, shit, Rabbit says softly, of course you do, and bows his head into her chest to protect himself from her scratching, while he half pummels her sides, half tries to embrace her and lift her. I love him. Damn you, Harry. We make love all the time. Good, he moans, mourning the receding of that light, that ecstasy of his hitting her, of knocking her open. Now she will become another cripple he must take care of. Good for you. It's been going on for months, she insists, writhing and trying to get free to spit again, furious at his response. He pins her arms, which would claw, at her sides, and squeezes her hard. She stares into his face. Her face is wild, still, frozen. She is seeking what will hurt him most. I do things for him, she says. I never do for you. Sure you do, he murmurs, wanting to have a hand free to stroke her forehead, to re-enclose her. He sees the gloss of her forehead and the gloss of the kitchen linoleum. Her hair wriggles outward into the spilled wriggles of the marbled linoleum pattern, worn where she stands at the sink. A faint, sweetish smell beneath them of the sluggish sink tie-in. She abandons herself to crying and softness and relief, and he has no trouble lifting her and carrying her into the living-room sofa. He has zombie strength. His shins shiver. His palm, sore from the clipper handles, is a crescent of bronze. She sinks lost into the sofa's breadth. He prompts her, he makes better love than me, to keep her confession flowing, as a physician moistens a boil. She bites her tongue, trying to think, surveying her ruins with an eye toward salvage. Impure desires, to save her skin, to be kind, to be exact, pollute her primary fear and anger. He's different, she says. I'm more exciting to him than to you. I'm sure it's just mostly our not being married. Where do you do it? Worlds whirl past and cloud her eyes. Car seats, rugs, tree undersides seen through windshields, the beigey gray carpeting in the narrow space between the 3 green steel desks and the safe and the Toyota cutout, motel rooms with their cardboard paneling and scratchy bedspreads, his dour bachelor's apartment stuffed with heavy furniture and tinted relatives in silver frames. Different places. Do you want to marry him? No. No. Why does she say this? The possibility opens an abyss. She would not have known this. A gate she had always assumed gave onto a garden, gave onto emptiness. She makes to move closer to Harry, to drag him down closer to her. She is lying on the sofa, one shoe off, her bruises just beginning to smart, while he kneels on the carpet, having carried her here. He remains stiff when she pulls at him. He is dead. She has killed him. He asks, "Was I so lousy to you?" "Oh, sweetie, no. You were good to me. You came back. You work in that dirty place. I don't know what got into me, Harry. I honestly don't." Whatever it was, he tells her, it must be still there. He looks like Nelson saying this, a mulling, discontented, hurt look, puzzling to pry something open, to get something out. She sees she will have to make love to him. A conflicted tide moves within her, desire for this pale and hairless stranger, abhorrence of this desire, fascination with the levels of betrayal possible. He shies, afraid of failing her. He falls back from the sofa and sits on the floor and offers to talk, to strike a balance. "Do you remember Ruth? The whore you lived with when you ran away?" She wasn't a whore, exactly. Whatever she was, what about her? "A couple of years ago I saw her again." "Did you sleep with her?" "Oh, God, no. She had become very straight. That was the thing. We met on Weiser Street. She was shopping. She had put on so much weight I didn't recognize her. I think she recognized me first, something about the way this woman looked at me. And then it hit me. Ruth. She still had this great head of hair. By then she had gone by. I followed her for a while, and then she ducked into Kroll's. I gave it an even chance. I waited there at the side entrance, figuring if she came out of that one, I'd say hello, and if she went out one of the others, okay. I gave it 5 minutes. I really wasn't that interested. But in saying this, his heart beats faster as it had beat then. Just as I was going away, she came out lugging 2 shopping bags and looked at me, and the first thing she said was, "Let me alone." She loved you, Janice explains. She did and she didn't, he says, and loses her sympathy with this complacence. I offered to buy her a drink, but all she'd let me do is walk her up toward the parking lot where the old Acme used to be. She lived out toward Galilee, she told me. Her husband was a farmer and ran a string of school buses. I got the impression he was some guy older than she was, who'd had a family before. She told me they had 3 children, a girl and 2 boys. She showed me their pictures in a wallet. I asked how often she got into town, and she said, "As far as you're concerned, never." Poor Harry, Janice says. She sounds awful. Well, she was, but still, she'd gotten heavy, as I said. She was sort of lost inside this other person who pretty much blended in with those other fat bag luggers you see downtown. But at the same time, still, it was her. All right, you still love her, Janice says. No, I didn't. I don't. You haven't heard the worst thing she did then. I can't believe you never tried to get in touch with her after you came back to me, at least to see what she did about her pregnancy. I felt I shouldn't, but he sees now, in his wife's dark and judging eyes, that the rules were more complicated, that there were some rules by which he should have. There were rules beneath the surface rules that also mattered. She should have explained this when she took him back. She asks, "What was the worst thing?" "I don't know if I should tell you." "Tell me. Let's tell each other everything. Then we'll take off all our clothes." She sounds tired. The shock of having given it all away must be sinking in. He talks to distract, as we joke with a loser at poker. "You already said it, about the baby." I thought of that and asked her how old the girl was, her oldest child. She wouldn't tell me. I asked to see the wallet pictures again to see if there was, a resemblance. She wouldn't show them to me. She laughed at me. She was really quite nasty. She said something very strange. What? I forget exactly. She looked me over and said I'd gotten fat. This from her. Then she said, "Run along, Rabbit. You've had your day in the lettuce patch," or something like that. "Nobody ever calls me Rabbit," was what sort of got me. This was 2 years ago, I think in the fall. I haven't seen her since. Tell me the truth now. These 10 years, haven't you had any other women? He runs his mind backward, encounters a few dark places, a room in a Polish-American club where Verity was having its annual blast, a skinny, flat-chested girl with a cold. She had kept her bra and sweater on. And then a weird episode at the Jersey Shore. Janice and Nelson off at the amusement park, him back from the beach in his trunks, a knock at the door of the cabin, a chunky colored girl, 2 skinny boys escorting her, offering herself for $5 or $7, depending what he wanted done. He had had trouble understanding her accent, had made her repeat with downcast eyes as the boys with her sniggered, "Screwin', suck off." Frightened, he had quickly shut the flimsy door on them, locked it against a threat of rape, and jerked off facing the wall. The wall smelled of damp and salt. He tells Janice, "Ever since that happened to Becky, I haven't been that much for sex. It comes on, wanting it, and then something turns it off. Let me up." Janice stands in front of the television set, the screen green ashes, a dead fire. Efficiently, she undresses herself. Her dark-tipped breasts droop tubular and sway as she disengages her pantyhose. Her tan stops below her throat. Other summers they used to go to the West Brewer pool some Sundays, but the kid became too big to go with his parents, so none go now. They haven't gone to the shore since the Springers discovered the Poconos. Buggy brown lakes imprisoned among dark green trees. Rabbit hates it there and never goes anywhere. Takes his vacation around the house. He used to daydream about going south, Florida or Alabama, to see the cotton fields and the alligators, but that was a boy's dream and died with the baby. He once saw Texas, and that has to be enough. Tongue pinched between her lips, naked Janice unbuttons his shirt, fumbling. Numbly, he takes over, completes the job. The pants, the shoes last, socks. Air knows him, air of day still lingering, summer air tingling along the skin that never knows the light. He and Janice have not made love in the light for years. She asks him in the middle of it, "Don't you love seeing? I used to be so embarrassed." In twilight they eat, still naked, salami sandwiches she makes, and drink whiskey. Their house stays dark, though the others around them that mirror it turn on their lights. These neighboring lights and the cars that pass along Vista Crescent throw sliding soft witnesses into their room. The open shelves lunge like parallel swords. The driftwood lamp throws a rhinoceros shadow. The school portrait of Nelson in its cardboard frame on the mantel, from beneath the embalming tints of its color wash, smiles. To help them see when darkness comes, Janice turns on the television set without sound, and by the bluish flicker of module models pantomiming flight, of riot troops standing before smashed supermarkets, of a rowboat landing in Florida having crossed the Atlantic, of situation comedies and Western melodramas, of great gray momentary faces unstable as quicksilver, they make love again, her body a stretch of powdery sand, her mouth a loose black hole, her eyes holes with sparks in them, his own body a barren landscape lit by bombardment, silently exploding images no gentler than Janice's playful ghostly touches that pass through him and do him no harm. She inverts herself and pours out upon him the months of her new knowledge. Her appetite frightens him, knowing he cannot fill it, any more than Earth's appetite for death can be satisfied. Her guilt became love. Her love becomes rage. The first time was too quick, but the second was sweet, with work and sweat in it, and the third time strainingly sweet, a work of the spirit almost purely, and the fourth time, because there was no fourth time, sad. Straddling his thighs, her cunt revealed by the flickering touch of the television to be lopsidedly agape, she bows her head, her hair tickling his belly, and drops cold tears, star pricks upon the slack flesh that has failed her. "Jesus," he says, "I forgot. We were supposed to go over to Mom's tonight." He dreams of driving north with Charlie Stavros in a little scarlet Toyota. The gear shift is very thin, a mere pencil, and he is afraid of breaking it as he shifts. Also, he is wearing golf shoes, which makes operating the pedals awkward. Stavros sits in the driver's seat, and with that stolid way of muttering, his square ringed hands masterfully gesturing, discusses his problem. Lyndon Johnson has asked him to be his vice president. They need a Greek. He would like to accept, but doesn't want to leave Brewer. So they are negotiating to have at least the summer White House moved to Brewer. They have lots of vacant lots they could build it on, Charlie explains. Rabbit is thinking, maybe this is his chance to get out of the printing plant and into a white-collar job. Services and software are where the future lies. He tells Stavros hopefully, "I can lick stamps." He shows him his tongue. They are on a superhighway heading north into the deserted coal regions, and beyond that the wilds of northern Pennsylvania. Yet here, in this region of woods and lakes, a strange white city materializes beside the highway, hill after hill of tall row houses white as bedsheets, crowding to the horizon, an enormous city, strange it seems to have no name. They part in a suburban region beside a drugstore, and Stavros hands him a map. With difficulty, Rabbit locates on it where they are. The metropolis, marked with a bullseye, is named simply The Rise. The Rise. The Rise. The dream is so unpleasant he awakes with a headache and an erection. His prick feels glassily thin and aches from all that work with Janice. The bed is empty beside him. He remembers they went to bed after 2, when the television screen became a buzzing test signal. He hears the sound of the vacuum cleaner downstairs. She is up. He dresses in his Saturday clothes, patched chinos and apricot polo shirt, and goes downstairs. Janice is in the living room, sweeping, pushing the silver tube back and forth. She glances over at him, looking old. Sex ages us. Priests are boyish, spinsters stay black-haired until after 50. We others, the demon rots us out. She says, "There's orange juice on the table and an egg in the pan. Let me finish this room." From the breakfast table he surveys his house. The kitchen on one side, the living room on the other are visible. The furniture that frames his life looks Martian in the morning light. An armchair covered in synthetic fabric enlivened by a silver thread, a sofa of air-foam slabs, a low table hacked to imitate an antique cobbler's bench. A piece of driftwood that is a lamp, nothing shaped directly for its purpose, gadgets designed to repel repair, nothing straight from a human hand. Furniture Rabbit has lived among, but has never known, made of substances he cannot name, that has aged as in a department store window, worn out without once conforming to his body. The orange juice tastes acid. It is not even frozen orange juice, but some chemical mixed-tinted orange. He breaks his egg into the pan, sets the flame low, thinks guiltily of his mother. Janice turns off the vacuum, comes over, pours herself some coffee to sit opposite him with as he eats. Purple dents beneath her eyes. He asks her, "Are you going to tell him?" "I suppose I must." "Why? Wouldn't you like to keep him?" "What are you saying, Harry?" "Keep him if he makes you happy." "I don't seem to, so go ahead, until you've had your fill at least." "Suppose I never have my fill?" "Then I guess you should marry him." "Charlie could never marry anybody." "Who says?" "He did, once. I asked him why not, and he wouldn't say. Maybe it has to do with his heart murmur. That was the only time we ever discussed it." "What do you and he discuss, except which way to do it next?" She might have risen to this taunt, but doesn't. She is very flat, very honest and dry this morning, and this pleases him. A graver woman than he has known reveals herself. "We contain chords someone else must strike." "We don't say much. We talk about funny little things, things we see from his windows, things we did as children. He loves to listen to me. When he was a boy, they lived in the worst part of Brewer. A town like Mount Judge looked marvelous to him. He calls me a rich bitch." The boss's daughter. "Don't, Harry. You said that last night. You can't understand. It would sound silly, the things we talk about. He has a gift, Charlie does, of making everything exciting. The way food tastes, the way the sky looks, the customers that come in. Once you get past that defensiveness, that tough guy act, he's quite quick and loving in what he sees. He felt awful last night after you left, that he had made you say more than you meant to. He hates to argue. He loves life, he really does, Harry. He loves life." "We all do." "Not really. I think our generation, the way we were raised, makes it hard for us to love life. Charlie does. It's like daylight. You want to know something?" He agrees. "Sure, knowing it will hurt." "Daylight, love. It's the best." "Okay, relax. I said keep the son of a bitch." "I don't believe you." "Only one thing. Try to keep the kid from knowing. My mother already knows. The people who visit her tell her. It's all over town. Talk about daylight." "Let it be," Janice says. She rises. "God damn your mother, Harry. The only thing she's ever done for us is try to poison our marriage. Now she's drowning in the poison of her life. She's dying, and I'm glad." "Jesus, don't say that." "Why not? She would if it were me. Who did she want you to marry? Tell me, who would have been wonderful enough for you? Who?" "My sister," he suggests. "Let me tell you something else. At first with Charlie, whenever I'd feel guilty so I couldn't relax, I'd just think of your mother, and how she's not only treated me, but treated Nelson, her own grandson, and I'd say to myself, okay, fella, sock it to me, and I'd just come." Okay, spare me the fine print." "I'm sick, so sick of sparing you things. There have been a lot of days," and this makes her too sad to confess, so that a constraint slips like a net over her face, which goes ugly under the pull, "when I was sorry you came back that time. You were a beautiful, brainless guy, and I've had to watch that guy die day by day. It wasn't so bad last night, was it? No. It was so good I'm angry. I'm all confused. You've been confused from birth, kid. He adds, any dying I've been doing around here, you've been helping it right along. At the same time, he wants to fuck her again, to see if she can turn inside out again. For some minutes last night she turned all tongue, and his mouth was glued to hers as if in an embryo the first cell division had not yet occurred. The phone rings. Janice plucks it from its carriage on the kitchen wall and says, Hi, Daddy. How was the Poconos? No, I know you got back days ago. I'm just being funny. Of course he's here. Here he is. She holds it out to Rabbit. For you. Old Man Springer's voice is reedy, coaxing, deferential. Harry, how's everything? Not bad. You still game for the ball game? Janice mentioned you asked about the tickets to the Blasts today. They're in my hand. 3 right behind first base. The manager's been a client of mine for 20 years. Yeah, great. The kid spent the night at the Fasnachts, but I'll get him back. You want to meet at the stadium? Let me pick you up, Harry. I'll be happy to pick you up in my car. That way we'll leave Janice yours. A note in his voice that didn't used to be there. Gentle, faintly wheedling, nursing along an invalid. He knows, too. The world knows. It'll be in the vat next week. Linotyper's wife lays local salesman. Greek takes strong anti-Viet stand. Tell me, Harry, Springer wheedles on, how is your mother's health? Rebecca and I are naturally very concerned. Very concerned. My father says it's about the same. It's a slow process, you know. They have drugs now that make it even slower. I've been meaning this week to get up to Mount Judge to see her, but we haven't managed. When you do, Harry, give her our love. Give her our love. Saying everything twice. He probably swung the Toyota franchise because the Japs could understand him second time around. Okay, sure enough. Want Janice back? No, Harry, you can keep her. A joke. I'll be by 12:20, 12:30. He hangs up. Janice is gone from the kitchen. He finds her in the living room, crying. He goes and kneels beside the sofa and puts his arms around her, but these actions feel like stage directions, followed woodenly. A button is off on her blouse, and the sallow curve of breast into the bra mixes with her hot breath in his ear. She says, You can't understand how good he was. Not sexy or funny or anything, just good. Sure I can. I've known some good people. They make you feel good. They make you feel everything you do and are is good. He never told me how dumb I am, every hour on the hour like you do, even though he's much smarter than you could ever imagine. He would have gone to college if he hadn't been a Greek. Oh, don't they let Greeks in now? The nigger quota too big? You say such sick things, Harry. It's because nobody tells me how good I am, he says, and stands. The back of her neck is vulnerable beneath him. One good karate chop would do it. The driveway crackles outside. It's much too early for Springer. He goes to the window. A blue Mustang. The passenger door swings open and Nelson gets out. On the other side appears Peggy Gring, wearing sunglasses and a miniskirt that flashes her big thighs like a card dealer's thumbs. Unhappiness, being deserted, has made her brisk, professional. She gives Rabbit hardly a hello, and her sunglasses hide the eyes that he knows from school days are wall. The two women go into the kitchen. From the sound of Janice snuffling, he guesses a confession is in progress. He goes outside to finish the yard work he began last night. All around him in the backyards of Vista Crescent, to the horizons of Penn Villas with their barbecue chimneys and aluminum wash trees, other men are out in their yards. The sound of his mower is echoed from house to house. His motions of bending and pushing are carried outwards as if in fragments of mirror suspended from the hot, blank sky. These, his neighbors, they come with their furniture in vans and leave with the vans. They get together to sign futile petitions for better sewers and quicker fire protection, but otherwise do not connect. Nelson comes out and asks him, "What's the matter with Mommy?" He shuts off the mower. "What's she doing?" "She's sitting at the table with Mrs. Fasnacht crying her eyes out." "Still? I don't know, kid. She's upset. One thing you must learn about women, their chemistries are different from ours. They cry easier. Mommy almost never cries. So maybe it's good for her. Get lots of sleep last night? Some. We watched an old movie about torpedo boats. Looking forward to the Blasts game? Sure. But not much, huh? I don't like sports as much as you do, Dad. It's all so competitive. That's life. Dog eat dog. You think? Why can't things just be nice? There's enough stuff for everybody to share. You think there is? Why don't you start then by sharing this lawn mowing? You push it for a while. You owe me my allowance. As Rabbit hands him $1 bill and 2 quarters, the boy says, I'm saving for a mini bike. Good luck. Also, Dad. Yeah? I think I should get $1.25 an hour for work. That's still under the federal minimum wage. See, Rabbit tells him, dog eat dog. As he washes up inside, pulling grass bits out of his cuffs and putting a Band-Aid on the ball of his thumb, tender place. In high school they used to say you could tell how sexy a girl was by how fat she was here. Janice comes into the bathroom, shuts the door, and says, I've decided to tell him. While you're at the ball game, I'll tell him. Her face looks taut, but pretty dried out. Patches of moisture glisten beside her nose. The tile walls amplify her sniffs. Peggy Gring's Mustang roars outside in leaving. Tell who what? Tell Charlie that it's all over, that you know. I said keep him. Don't do anything for today, at least. Calm down. Have a drink. See a movie. See that space movie again. You slept through the best parts. That's cowardly. No, he and I have always been honest with each other. I must tell him the truth. I think you're just looking for an excuse to see him while I'm tucked away at the ballpark. You would think that. Suppose he asks you to sleep with him. He wouldn't. Suppose he does, as a graduation present. She stares at him boldly, dark gaze tempered in the furnace of betrayal. It comes to him. Growth is betrayal. There is no other route. There is no arriving somewhere without leaving somewhere. I would, she says. Where are you going to find him? At the lot. He stays on until 6 summer Saturdays. What reason are you going to give him for breaking it off? Why, the fact that you know. Suppose he asks you why you told. It's obvious why I told. I told because I'm your wife. Tears belly out between her lids, and the tension of her face breaks like Nelson's when a hidden anxiety, a D or a petty theft or a headache is confessed. Harry denies his impulse to put his arm around her. He does not want to feel wooden again. She teeters, keeping her balance while sobbing, sitting on the edge of the bathtub while the plastic shower curtain rustles at her shoulder. Aren't you going to stop me? She brings out at last. Stop you from what? From seeing him. Given this rich present of her grief, he can afford to be cruel. Coolly, he says, No, see him if you want to, just as long as I don't have to see the bastard. And avoiding the sight of her face, he sees himself in the cabinet mirror, a big, pink, pale man going shapeless under the chin, his little lips screwed awry in what wants to be a smile. The gravel in the driveway crackles again. From the bathroom window, he sees the boxy dun top of Springer's spandy new Toyota wagon. To Nelson he calls, Grandpa's here. Let's go. To Janice he murmurs, Sit tight, kid. Don't commit yourself to anything. To his father-in-law, sliding in beside him, across a spaghetti of nylon safety straps, Rabbit sings, Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. The stadium is on the southern side of Brewer, through a big cloverleaf, past the brick hulks of 2 old hosiery mills, along a 3-lane highway, where in these last years several roadside restaurants have begun proclaiming themselves as Pennsylvania Dutch, with giant plaster Amishmen and neon hex signs. Genuine Dutch cooking, Pennsylvania Dutch smorgasbord. Trying to sell what in the old days couldn't be helped, making a tourist attraction out of fat fried food and a diet of dough that would give a pig pimples. They pass the country fairgrounds where every September the same battered gyp stands return, and the farmers bring their stinking livestock, and Seraphina, the Egyptian temptress, will take off all her clothes for those yokels who put up $1 extra. The first naked woman he saw was Seraphina, or her mother. She kept on her high heels and a black mask and bent way backwards. She spread her legs and kept a kind of token shimmy rhythm as she moved in a semicircle, so every straining head, luckily he was tall even then, could see a trace of her cleft, an exciting, queasy-making wrinkle shabbily masked by a patch of hair that looked to him pasted on. Rubbed threadbare? He didn't know. He couldn't imagine. Springer is shaking his head over the York riots. Sniper fire 4 nights in a row, Harry. What is the world coming to? We're so defenseless, is what strikes me. We're so defenseless against the violent few. All our institutions have been based on trust. Nelson pipes up. It's the only way they can get justice, Grandpa. Our laws defend property instead of people. They're defeating their own purposes, Nellie. Many a white man of goodwill like myself is being turned against the blacks. Slowly but surely he's being turned against them. It wasn't Vietnam beat Humphrey, it was law and order in the streets. That's the issue that the common man votes upon. Am I right or wrong, Harry? I'm such an old fogey I don't trust my own opinions anymore. One old geezer, Harry is remembering, at the side of the little stage, reached from behind and put his hand up on her pussy, shouting, "Aha!" She stopped her dance and stared out of the black mask. The tent went quiet. The geezer, surprisingly, found enough blood in himself to blush. Aha! That cry of triumph, as if he had snared a precious small animal, Harry never forgot. Aha! He slouches down and, in answer to Springer, says, "Things go bad. Food goes bad. People go bad. Maybe a whole country goes bad. The blacks now have more than ever, but it feels like less, maybe. We were all brought up to want things, and maybe the world isn't big enough to take all that wanting. I don't know. I don't know anything." Old man Springer laughs. He snorts and snarls so his little gray mouse of a mustache merges with his nostril hairs. "Did you hear about Teddy Kennedy this morning?" "What about him?" "No." "Shut your ears, Nellie. I forgot you were in the car, or I wouldn't have mentioned it." "What, Grandpa? What did he do? Did somebody shoot him?" "Apparently, Harry." Springer talks out of the side of his mouth as if to shield Nelson, yet so distinctly the child can easily hear. "He dumped some girl from Pennsylvania into one of those Massachusetts rivers. Murder as plain as my face." Springer's face from the side is a carving of pink bone, with rosy splotches where the cheekbones put most pressure, and a bump of red on the point where the nose turns. A hatchet face, creased like an Indian's from a constant salesman's smile. One thing at least about setting type, there's a limit on how much ass you must kiss. "Did they get him? Is he in jail, Grandpa?" "Ah, Nelson, they'll never put a Kennedy in jail. Palms will be greased. Evidence will be suppressed. I call it a crying shame." Rabbit asks, "What do you mean, dumped some girl?" "They found her in his car, upside down in the water beside some bridge. I forget the name. One of those islands they have up there. It happened last night, and he didn't go to the police until they were about to nab him. And they call this a democracy, Harry, is the irony of it. What would you call it?" "I'd call it a police state run by the Kennedys is what I would call it."